Good morning, Rev Heads.
Good morning.
We got to come up with something for you. Maybe not. Are you frozen?
I am full of joy.
Yeah, you are. Welcome to this Thursday, July 2nd, 2020 version of Pastor Mike and Pastor Bree present
Fun with Faith. You sounded really sad about fun with Faith. Thanks for noticing me.
That's right. It is that kind of day.
Really?
No.
It's another bright, beautiful,
It really is.
hotter than hot morning. It's warm out there.
Yeah. So we do want to invite you. We thank you for joining us. We do want to invite you to share us out, like us, laugh at us, whatever little emoji you want to put to that. And while you're inviting friends in, we are gonna settling in. We're gonna take the good, take the bad, take them both. There we have the hacks of life.
Hacks of life. Yay. There was great rejoicing. Yay.
I have a feeling, folks, that after we take our break next week, the hacks of life may be over.
Whenever you say that, somebody goes, "No, I love the hacks of life," and then I feel like I'm the mean person taking candy away from people. It's because I like candy.
All right. Our life hack for Thursday, July 2nd. To make fluffier white rice, add a teaspoon of lemon juice to the boiling water before you put the rice in the pot.
Is it a teaspoon no matter how much rice you're making? I feel like the ratios should change. Will it impart a lemon flavor? I don't want lemon rice.
I don't know.
That's probably a thing that people like, but I don't want lemon rice. I don't care how fluffy it is.
Okay.
All right.
So there you go.
Y'all can try that.
There you go. Did anybody try that? Do we see comments? Nope. Just Billy. Billy, did you ever put lemon juice in your rice? I don't know. All right. So on this day in history. July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress votes for independence from Great Britain.
Somebody ought to make a musical about that.
That was a thing. And then July 2nd, 1937.
Oh, that was our first date.
That was not our first date. Can feel like that through lockdown, though.
That was the first day of quarantine.
No, July 2nd, 1937, the first. Oh, vinegar. Billy says vinegar might work.
Oh.
It's probably true.
It's like it'd be better than
lemon. Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. June 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart disappears. The Lockheed aircraft carrying American aviator Amelia Earhart and navigator Frederick Noonan is reported missing near Howland Island.
Nobody ever wonders what happened to Fred. Poor Fred Noonan.
The pair were attempting to fly around the world when they lost their bearings during the most challenging leg of the global journey. So those are things that happened in history.
All right. That's you wanted it. So it's all right. All right. We've got more important things today.
We do. Today, in place of music and possibly the rest of the devotional, depending on how things go and how inquisitive you all are, we have my friend Rhonda Bantsimba, who is a therapist and all-around wonderful person, who is going to talk with us about some mental health stuff today, because we all got a lot of stuff going on. Yes. You'll remember Rhonda from early on in Fun with Faith. She was one of the first live people we had on, and then like the sound. It
was back when we couldn't hear her, but you all told us she was saying great stuff.
Yep. So
hopefully we can hear her this time.
So Rhonda, welcome.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Doing all right.
Good. Well, we can obviously we can hear each other now, so that's
we can.
Good. That's good.
I don't see a lot of people commenting that they can't hear us, so that's the other. That's always the other challenge. Can everybody hear everybody?
Yes, Bree. I was thinking about what you were saying about the lemon in the rice, and I'm wondering if that small amount is just enough to change the water chemically to do what it needs to do without affecting the taste.
That's entirely possible. We may have to try it now because I've
Yeah.
talked about this one quite a bit.
And I like rice. So
Yeah, and really can't go wrong with lemon rice. It's good stuff. So
right.
anyway, but yeah, so I'm excited to be here today.
We're glad to have you.
Mhm.
How have you been doing throughout quarantine, lockdown, all that?
Good question. That's a really good question. You know, I've for the most part I've been okay because you know, I've been working through the whole time. I was able, you know, as probably every therapist, is to take their practice online. So I've been seeing clients online. So I've been one of those people that have been blessed to be able to work throughout all of this and not necessarily have our financial bottom line affected the way so many people have. And so I'm really grateful for that. But I also recognize that, you know, the worries and the things that have been happening over the past 3-4 months have been an incredible source of distress. I mean, even for me, it's been an incredible source of distress. And trying to just kind of maintain some groundedness and trying to help my kids maintain groundedness, you know, especially my youngest, who's incredibly social. And to have her kind of locked away, relying on Kid Messenger has not been the greatest.
Yeah.
How about you guys? How have you been?
It's up and it's up and there's up and downs. There's ups and downs.
Yeah. Our children have also struggled with the reality of being in quarantine. And our oldest especially feels the uncertainty of that. How long is this going to last? Is the whole world different now?
Right.
She's kind of internalized some of that anxiety and uncertainty that everybody's feeling, and it's you know, it's hard. So I don't know how to help her when we don't have those answers either.
Exactly. That's what makes it hard, right? Because they look to us to be able to like have answers, and then when they see uncertainty in us, it's like, what the heck? If mom and dad don't know what's going on, like who's driving this bus? You know, so it's hard.
Yeah. So when we started this out, we were the big issue was the COVID-19, was the coronavirus was flattening the curve.
Yes.
We knew and acknowledged that there were going to be difficulties with that. There are going to be difficulties with the economy after that.
Right.
And now throughout this time, it appears as though many people have I don't know, had the time to actually see and pay attention to the reality of folks like George Floyd, Elijah McClain, those kinds of things happening. And so add to the pandemic fear of COVID, the economic distress that people protested with guns on the Capitol steps to try and open up hair salons again, to this reality of systemic racism that I mean, I'm a fairly spiritual guy. I love the Bible. I read it a lot. I was a big fan of the Left Behind series. That's not my theology now, nor ever was it really. But like I can understand how people look and think like, man, things are getting bad. How do you have any advice for how we can keep our heads on straight through all of this?
Yeah. You know, the thing that immediately pops to mind when you say all of that is just stop and breathe, right? I think that part of challenge with our culture is that we are always on the go. We're always busy. We're always moving along to the next thing. And very rarely, you know, except maybe on moments of vacation, if you can afford a vacation, you can take vacation, do we slow down enough to just breathe, let alone to address any other issues. You know, it's important to acknowledge the power of the breath. The breath is a great regulator for anxiety. It tells our brain when our brain gets anxious and starts to overwork. When we stop and take a moment to just breathe, it lets our brain know, oh, wait a minute, we're not in danger, because if I were in danger, I wouldn't be able to breathe deeply like this. And so it helps to kind of short circuit that flight or fight response. And so I think it's really important for us to remember to just start there at the baseline. Stop and breathe.
Mm.
And then I think when we are faced with such, we've got this double whammy, right? This double whammy of this pandemic and all of the racial unrest and social unrest that, quite frankly, has been around for a really long time
Right.
and, hasn't gone anywhere. I think what is happening right now is that because we've been slowed down by COVID-19, it gave us the space, it gave particularly white America the space to actually see the racial stuff as it came up in, it was just these convergence of events, right? Like it happened in rapid succession during this pandemic, and people were like, whoa, what the heck are we seeing right now? And it's, you're seeing what, Black America has been trying to tell you for a really long time, that, this has been happening in our community since, there was our community. And I'm sad that those things had to happen. I'm also glad that people's eyes are being opened. And I also recognize that there are some folks for whom it's so scary to even think about it that they continue to want to deny it. I've seen it happen on social media and gotten in exchanges with people who still try to deny it. And so I think with so much overwhelm, it's really important to just take a step back and ground yourself and just say, okay, this is what's happening, and kind of wade in as you can. You can't try to take it all on. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much for one person. It's too much for all of us. And so at the same time, learning how to sit in discomfort. We seek comfort and we seek to avoid pain all the time, right? And so we have to condition ourselves to sit in this discomfort because it is the reality. This pandemic is the reality. The situation with the racial stuff is our reality. And as long as we try to continue burying our head in the sand, they don't go anywhere, right? They don't go anywhere. They just intensify. It's like, when your kid wants something from you and maybe you're not paying as much attention. You're like, mom. And you're like, okay, honey, okay. I'll get to that in a second. Mom. So it just intensifies and sort of, and that's what we're seeing here is this intensification of this thing that has been demanding our attention for centuries. And now it's like, all right, now I got your attention. I'm really about to show you some stuff. And so here we are trying to navigate these very real and serious problems and keep ourselves grounded enough to be able to face them. And so I would say don't turn away from it. That's the other piece. Don't turn away from what is happening, and just allow yourselves to see. By the same token, I'm one of those folks who haven't watched the videos of George Floyd's murder and of Ahmaud Arbery's murder, because as an African American woman, I've seen so much of it, and it's traumatizing. And it's like I don't need to watch a video of what I already know and what I've been telling people for a really long time. At the same time, I do think to some degree it's important for people who are not part of our community to watch it so that they really see it. Not flooding necessarily, because it can be overwhelming, but to give some context and some support to what has been talked about for a really long time. So I can ramble on, but I'd much rather to exchange, and so I talk for hours.
I think a big piece of where this all intersects for me is that both in reality to the coronavirus and also the systemic racism and the violence that's happening, it's very easy not just to be overwhelmed, but to feel helpless.
Yes.
That I'm powerless in the midst of it all.
Yes.
How do I care? How do you? Because I know that I do have some power to do some things, but it's so big, and it feels so far beyond me. How do I take care of myself in the midst of that, or not shut down and turn away?
Right. You know, I think one of the important things is to remember where is my circle of influence? What can I actually change? And what are the things that I'm powerless to change? And how do I hold that? Like, how do I hold that reality? One of the things that I had to learn a long time ago in my life was about surrendering to something that, you know, I just had no power over. And so the areas where I can influence change and where I can have power is, one, I can put on a mask when I leave my house. I can maintain social, what did I call it before? Physical distancing, so that I'm not endangering other people, because, you know, and to keep everything's political, right? You know, the personal is political. At the same time, wearing a mask and physical distancing is not a political statement. I want to say that really clearly. These are not political statements. Despite all the cucamonga going on around on the federal level about this, the reality is that we're over 130,000 deaths in the United States from COVID-19. That is not a political statement. Some people might say, oh, well, that's fake or whatever. No, that's not a political statement. It is what it is. So what can we do? Wearing a mask and physical distancing is not about whether or not you feel you're susceptible to the virus. It's about, I could possibly be asymptomatic, not have any symptoms, and I could pass it to someone else. So wearing a mask and staying away is me caring for my community and not spreading this virus. Okay, so that's one thing. That's the area where I've got power and influence. The other area that I can have power and influence as an African-American woman in all of the racial and social unrest is that the power that I have is to make sure that I'm engaging in self-care, recognizing what my boundaries are, my limits are in terms of consumption of imagery and information, being a safe place for my children to come and talk about it and to ask questions. And I think that this piece might be applicable to everyone, but specifically also about making sure that I am not re-traumatizing myself or traumatizing my children by exposing them to a whole lot of imagery of people being murdered. As a white person, I think that the other piece that's really happening for a lot of people for whom this hasn't been in their community is having the realization that, you know, dawn on them that this has been going on in essence under their nose without their knowledge, because when you are conditioned not to see, and it's a matter of conditioning. This isn't like individual white people are bad because X, Y, and Z. It's because the social structure has been created in a way to condition white people not to see what has been happening in communities of color, and particularly in African American communities. And so as a white person, you can challenge yourself to see, to walk in another person's shoes, to think about what would I do if I went if the places that I went, people were questioning my right to be there, as if they had authority to ask those questions and to expect an answer, right? That there's this inherent authority given to white people to question the existence of people of color in spaces where they feel like we don't belong. And so, and some of these words that I'm going to say today are going to hit people in a really raw place. And for that, I say, I welcome that. I welcome your discomfort. Please, you know, also know that I'm uncomfortable. This is not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination to say these things. What I have discovered through all of this is that I don't have the ability anymore to participate in the conditioning that we as African Americans receive, which is to always be mindful of not offending white people's sensibilities. So the way that plays out sometimes is you'll see something happen in the world, whatever, and the immediate thought is, oh Lord, the white folks gonna flip out when they see that. Or, how do we shield them from that? Because historically, not shielding white people, or not making sure that we are not offending their sensibilities could result in death, right? So that if I wasn't, properly deferent to a white person's authority, that could end up in me being killed. And so we've been conditioned over time. It may look a little different now, but we've been conditioned over time to always be mindful of how white people will react to certain things, and that's exhausting. And so what I've recognized is that I can no longer carry that, and so the things that I say, I'm just going to say them, and I welcome the result of that. And so, be it dialogue, exchange, somebody being upset, okay, I can take that. And so, the other piece I would say, and Mike, you and I had this conversation the other day about talking to our children, and that it is incredibly painful to talk about these things with our children, because we see children as innocent. We see them as not being able to hold and to carry this stuff. And I think that our children are really showing us that they have a lot more capacity for holding this. And I think, just given the conversation that you and I had about Michaela's response, that I really think that will be a real pivotal moment in her life for her. Like, I believe she's going to take the conversations that you've been having with her, that you guys have been having with her, and that is going to write something on her soul, on her DNA, that will give her this heart and this mind for social justice and for viewing all of us as human family. And I'm really grateful that you have taken on doing that for her and doing that for us as a community as a whole. We all need to do that. Our children are not going to break apart if they know what's going on. So again, I'm rambling and I'll stop.
No, that is a difficult conversation to have. I didn't realize just how little she'd really been exposed to that history until we started having that conversation around George Floyd's murder. And I realized I couldn't just come out and say somebody was killed by the police. I had to walk it back through 400 years plus of history.
Right.
And I think I mentioned to you, we didn't even get to the Civil War before she was upset and kind of wanting to take a break.
Yeah.
And I had to say, baby, we ain't even close yet.
Not even the tip of that.
And that's just what I know, right?
Right.
There is so much more history we've been learning in recent weeks and months that we were never taught in high school, and we're having to take these things in and learn these things, and so just what I knew of racism and slavery from what I learned in the diluted history of junior high and high school was enough to scare her and want her to take a break. And that wasn't even close to half of it.
Well, I think what she had been exposed to too, right? Because she has friends of lots of different backgrounds, lots of different colors. And so a lot of her experience of entering in these conversations had been, it was a long time ago. Isn't it sad that a long time ago people were judged by the color of their skin? And I think that's what was, this is what our 10-year-old went through. This is what a lot of adults are going through right now in the white community is, this was not a long time ago.
Yes.
This is now.
Yes, this is right now.
And that really changes the narrative from,
For sure.
Aren't we better than we used to be? Look how good we are, to, wow, we've got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. You bring up that's such an excellent point. I mean, so many times I've heard people say, why are you guys still living in the past? Why are you looking backward? That's why your community can't move forward and da 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 da. And it's like, dude, if it was the past, I always think, don't you think we'd rather be talking about something else?
Yeah.
Don't you think we'd rather be focused on, economic, stability within our community? And I would so rather be having that conversation than talking about racial stuff. But, it's like when somebody offends or has hurt you, not offends you, has hurt you. And the response is, okay, well, I'm sorry, let's just move past it. It's like, okay, but you gotta hear the impact. See, because if I don't let you hear the impact, if I don't have you understand how this really affected me, that sort of brush off apology leaves room for you to do it again and to say you didn't know. And so that's kind of what we're experiencing here in America, is that people will say, oh, well, we elected a black president and Lincoln freed the slaves and the civil rights movement and da 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 da. Shouldn't we be past that now? It was like, yeah, but a law can't change an attitude. A law can't change how you feel on the inside. So we can legislate all day long, and I'm totally down with legislation for equity and equality, right? But there's some other deeper work that we have to do. There's some deeper internal work individually and collectively that we have to do and to be willing to hear. And so for the longest time, America, particularly white America, has not been willing to hear the impact and the ripple effect of, what the slave trade and what, 250 years of enslavement and bondage have done. And then, how many ever years of Jim Crow and lynching and all and segregation and all of that. Like the ripple effects of that are vast and wide, and they've rippled through every area of our lives, and even in things that people don't think of, when it even comes down to language, like, how things that are bad are deemed black heart, black this, black that, and things that, are deemed good are white, cowboy with the white hat. Now that might seem really insignificant, right? Like, oh, you guys are just, splitting hairs too much. But when you think about it in the context of everything else, it's just one more component of how that messaging gets reinforced. It's like a how when you get a booster, like a booster to a vaccination or something like that. It's a booster, right? It just kind of keeps it out there and re-ups in the psyche. Even it's like background, it's like programs running in the background of your computer. And so things like that just are keep those programs running in the background, so that you might not even be conscious of it or conscious of how it impacts your actions, your interactions, and how you move through the world. But it is being filtered through that, right? And so much so that you don't, like, I remember years ago, when my oldest child, who's now 14, we were going to Costco. And when we were leaving Costco, you know how sometimes when you have a kid with you, they'll make a little smiley face on the receipt. And so fast forward, several months later, we were at another Costco. And we were going out, and there were two African-American women checking the receipts going out. And, oh, no, I'm sorry. One was African-American and one was white. And my daughter, who was 4 years old, said, well, I want the white girl to do it. And I said, what? And she says, I want the white girl to do it. And I said, why? Well, I just think she'll do a better job.
Wow.
That was my reaction. My eyes were wide. I was blown away. And so after we got out and I talked to her a little bit about it, and she became upset, because I think she thought I was mad at her. I wasn't, but what that illustrated to me, because I know for certain that nobody had ever come to my 4-year-old child and said, black people just really are terrible at doing things and white people are just better at that. I know that never happened. So What that tells me is that it's just in the air. It's in everything that is around us, that a 4-year-old child would pick up the notion, well, I just think a white girl would do a better job. And so we really have to question that kind of stuff at every turn, and it's exhausting, and you get tired, and sometimes you don't want to. But if we are truly going to eradicate it, we got to shine light on it everywhere it is to root them roaches out.
There was a study a long time ago, but I've seen it on YouTube, where they had two baby dolls,
Mm-hmm.
a white skin colored baby doll and a black baby doll, and they brought kids in, white kids, black kids, everybody, and they asked, which doll would you prefer to play with? Well, the white one. Why? Because it's clean, right? Or which one is the good doll? Which one's the bad doll? And these are kids who absolutely, like your daughter, have not had that
direct
experience,
messaging, right?
But it's just in the air. It's just that piece, and I know it's hard for people. I've shared with you my my story and my journey on this, Rhonda, and I'm because I know that feeling that a lot of folks have, that we've talked about, that they just want to push this away and not think about it and say this is the past. So I get that. But what about, I know there are probably folks that'll I'm hoping there are folks that'll watch this, that have been seeing this, that are on the fence, so to speak, that are wanting to learn more. Is there anything you would recommend, resources, those kinds of things that people could read, that people could look at to help them to understand the reality?
So I've been hearing a lot, and I personally haven't read it, but I've been hearing a lot about the book White Fragility.
Okay.
And that's been floating around a lot in recent weeks. And I am I've seen some videos of the author who, is talking about the issue. And so that might be a really good place to start, because I think it might even be kind of foundational, because I think what she talks about in there is helping white people to see the areas where they do shut down on this conversation, and how shutting down is actually privilege, because a white person can decide, I just don't want to talk about this, and walk away from the conversation, and they never have to engage it ever, if they choose not to. And that really is a privilege, because I don't get to do that. I don't get to not be part of the target group of people for whom that this is a real issue. So I think that that's a really good place to start. There is also an organization, and I think we should actually have a conversation about this. There's an organization out of New Orleans called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And they do a workshop called Undoing Racism. And I know that they have some materials on their website, and their website is pisab.org, I believe. And I think that we probably might want to have a conversation about how to bring them to our community and do the workshop there. I know Flint was doing it for a while, years ago, like every year or something like that. But it's one of those things where we can't start putting on the brakes now that the awareness is out there. We gotta move fully forward into this, immerse ourselves, go through the pain, go through the discomfort, and come out on the other end with some new information that maybe we didn't know and don't like, but now that we know, we can move forward doing better. The other thing that I would say is, there are people out there, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's written extensively, Bell Hooks, starting to increase your library of African-American writers, both fiction and nonfiction, because the perspective is so beautiful and rich, and there's so much information. But Ta-Nehisi Coates does a really good job of, and I'm going to have to find the spelling of his name because it doesn't sound like it's written. Well, Coates is Coates. So if you do a search for that, you might find, I'll type it up while I'm talking here. It is an unusual spelling. Angela Davis has written a lot of information about, the prison system. And if you have Netflix, there's a documentary on there called The 13th. And
So good.
isn't that good? I mean, it really is good. And it really breaks down how the prison system has become so filled up with African Americans, even though we're only 13% of the population. We're more than 50% of the population in prison. Now, some people would hear that and go, well, it's just because you're worse people than we are, right? And it's not that. I know it's heartbreaking. It's like, oh, come on, man, come on, that can't be true, right? But it gives this wonderful history and examination, and that what we see today in the prison system dates all the way back to slavery. And so I think that, when we talk about, well, that's over, that's the past, it's not the past, because we can make direct connections between what happened then throughout history to what we're seeing today. And so if there's that temptation to kind of go, oh, what's in the past, I am asking people, I am imploring people, I'm challenging people to resist that sentiment and to dig deeper on that, because we're not making it up.
Yeah, one of the things I tell people who have said to me, "Oh, this is the past." I point out that Ruby Bridges is only 65 years old.
There you go.
This is not a past thing. And I've heard from other white people, well, I never owned slaves, and my ancestors never owned slaves, and I've never said a racist thing. And that's really not what this is about. This is about a system that was built that specifically caters or is easier to navigate for people with white skin. And when it comes to it, at least from my perspective, and you can talk about this too if you like, but when I see defund the police, or when I see things like that, I'm not seeing that as an indictment against all police officers, but against the institution, what it has become, what is allowed. Not necessarily that every single police officer is a bad person, a flaming racist.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point to bring up, because we have to remember that the origins of police in this country were slave catchers, right? That is the genesis of policing in the United States, was as slave catchers. So if you think about how that lies at their very foundation, is the control and the capture and the subjugation of Black bodies. It is not a big leap to understand what we're seeing today then, because it's woven into the very a fabric of the history of policing. So that doesn't mean does that mean every single police officer who joins the force goes in thinking, I'm going to control me some Black bodies? Yeah. No, it's not it at all. But what it is that we have to understand and recognize that even if, again, it's that background, that program running in the background of the institution, not necessarily the individual. And so then when that institution is training you, you might not even say, we treat Black people this way, right? We all have learned coded language. We know that certain words are codes for certain groups of people. We can deny it. We can hold it. Well, they didn't say that. Yeah, but when we talk about urban, who we talking about? We know what urban means. We know what suburban means. We know what rural means. We know what that means. It doesn't mean there aren't white people living in urban areas. It doesn't mean there aren't Black people living in rural areas. But that is not what those codes have been historically used to describe. And so we got to start with owning what's right in front of our face, right? And so to really be truthful, I kind of think about, what South Africa did, right, with the Truth and Reconciliation. We have to start by being truthful about what is, about our history, the ugly, the great, the painful. I promise you, it won't hurt forever. I promise you it won't hurt forever. It will hurt really, really, really bad up front, because we're hearing, for a lot of folks, they're hearing stuff that they've never thought about, and it's overwhelming and it's terrible. But I promise you it won't hurt forever if we just see it and own it and heal from it. We haven't healed, Black and white alike, because what I think a lot of white folks don't recognize is slavery jacked y'all up too, really bad.
Absolutely. It's weird that I think about this situation, the systemic racism, the slavery of it, and I think back, and I've had conversations with folks who said, well, Black people owned slaves too, and Black people sold slaves too. Absolutely. Human beings have a history of being horrible to each other.
Absolutely.
And whether you are the person doing the horrible thing or receiving the horrible thing, it affects you. It makes you something, to the person being oppressed. It makes you feel less than human.
Yes.
To the person doing the oppression, it makes you less than human. Just on a different end of that spectrum. And so yeah, there were slaves in Egypt, ancient Egypt, where there were no white people.
Right.
There have been slaves for a long time.
Right.
For a long time, we have done horrible things to each other. And the goal here, when I will wear my Black Lives Matter T-shirt or have my Black Lives Matter sign on the lawn, that's not just about Black lives.
Right.
It's about everybody.
It's about everybody.
That's about getting to the point where all lives truly do matter, because they're supposed to.
Because they're supposed to, right? Without question, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So, Rhonda, I want to thank you for coming on again, and we will have you back again, hopefully sooner than a couple months. Because it's so much fun to talk with you, to see you, because I miss hanging out.
I know.
But also your wisdom, man. There are days I do need to take a step back, take a breath, and ground myself. And fantastic advice to not turn away, especially for folks for whom this is new territory that you're starting to deal with. Don't turn away from it. I mentioned to you the other night when I saw you that I sat and watched the hour-long footage of Rashard Brooks's death, the whole incident, and I forced myself to watch it, even though there were times like he's obviously so very drunk, and it's so very funny until you remember where it ends. And then you see where it ends, and it's just horrific. But we can't look away. We can't.
No.
We can't. And so I thank you so much for sharing that wisdom with us, and sharing some of your experience. And yeah, I look forward to the future.
I do too. I am optimistic, and I think I'd love to end on that note. For me, that even in the face of such turmoil and such pain, and it is painful, I am optimistic. I hold out hope that we can do this. I have to hold out hope for my children, for your children, for all of our children, because we are making moves and decisions right now for what world we're going to leave to our kids. And you know, I want to leave a world where we can all talk together and we can all make decisions with each other's humanity in mind, and to recognize that we are all family. We are all family. And yes, all lives do matter, but they can't all matter until Black Lives Matter.
Amen.
Period.
All right. Thanks again, Rhonda, and we'll see you soon.
God
Bye.
bless.
Oh, I just need to like schedule a regular coffee time Zoom with Rhonda or something.
You do, yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Rhonda, for being with us, for your wisdom and just your
Bringing
optimism.
a different voice and
Yeah.
a different experience
Yeah.
to us as well. We need
Appreciate
that.
So, reminder, Friday, tomorrow, that's the Drunken Rooster food truck going to be here from 4 to 8, along with Motor City Sweet Treats ice cream. So come on, check that out. We have the other food trucks coming up. Pretty much if there's a Friday,
There's a food truck.
there's a food truck. So please come on, check that out. Also want to remind you, No Fun with Faith next week, July 6th through the 10th. Pastor Bree and I and the girls are taking a break.
We'll see how that works.
We'll see how. Yeah.
Go be in a different house together.
That's right. Zoom Bible study will resume mid-month, and then live stream worship. Want to make sure you remember will be 11 a.m. Instead of 9:30, so 11 a.m. If you are in need of some mental health services, and I've mentioned before, I had a moment where I really needed to step back and take a breath, and just couldn't figure that out in the moment, and it was rough. If you're there, if you're having trouble taking that step back, there are places you can call and get help. I have seen advertised some places that for folks that are unemployed can get free counseling. I did not put any of those up there because I have not actually checked or vetted any of those.
Yeah.
So please do reach out if you need help with any of those things. Want to encourage you, go to commonprayer.net, check out the readings for today that we did
pray before we
get
sign
to.
up. We haven't prayed at all today.
And Bree's gonna close us in some prayer.
Yeah. God, you have been with us. We ask you to continue to be with us as we catch our breath, as we wrestle with our place in a very confusing world, as we wrestle with our own place in a heritage of sin, in a system that devalues your beloved people. Oh God, restore us where we are weary. Teach us how to sit in discomfort. And keep calling us forward towards that vision of a future where we truly are one in you. Bless us with strength to live through the rest of this day. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Remember, folks, God loves you, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Amen.
Have a great day.